Well, greetings everyone, and welcome to our webinar on dissonance. My name is George Litterst. I'm speaking to you from a little town called Rehoboth in southern Massachusetts, a little east of Providence, Rhode Island. And I believe I have on my computer screen the image of the one and only Paul Sheftel. Where do I find you in cyberspace today, Paul?
In the little town of Manhattan in New York City.
Okay, very good. Well, I'm really excited to be able to do this webinar with you, Paul, in part because you have, over the years, through your own compositions and arrangements, have created such a wide stylistic variety of music that we're going to be able to use most of your work as examples in our webinar today. And the webinar is on a really important topic that I think is often not sort of highlighted as a topic of discussion amongst piano teachers at conferences and so forth, but it's a topic that underlies every aspect of our experience of music. Dissonance, which in Western music typically moves us to toward consonance, um, and so many other things that we're going to be discussing. And if you'll give me a moment here, Paul, what I'd like to do is to introduce this topic just by giving a couple of anecdotes of some recent conversations I've had with a couple of my adult students. No doubt you and um, teachers who are attending our webinar today have experienced. You give a piece of music to a student, and a student comes back and says, I don't like the sound of those notes, or is this a right note? It just doesn't sound right. And in fact, it is.
Well, actually, if I can interject, well, I'm having the same problem myself because I've been doing an in-depth study of the well-tempered clavier and learning some of the fugues in slow motion. I run into that same problem. Is this actually what he wrote?
That's right. And in fact, you made the point I was heading towards, which is very often when a student is learning a piece properly, which generally means starting slowly and carefully, uh, they're experiencing dissonance in these very isolated chunks, uh, unconnected from the larger structures of which they to which they apply, and so they are often in a state of confusion about that. And so recently, two different examples came up in my teaching with adult students. One is an adult in his 30s who's been studying for about 3/4 of a year, and another is a young adult who's in her late 20s. And in both cases, I addressed the question by asking them a question. I said, what do you think about this sound? And the reaction was kind of negative. I asked, well, what do you think about this sound? And in both cases, they were moderately a little more favorable to that sound, but didn't really care about that one so much either. But then when I played this, and those sounds were embedded in that chord progression, that dominant seven to tonic progression, they were quite happy with the result. And so that was a nice little springboard into this topic of dissonance, that there's always a context for dissonance. And it's those contexts that we're going to be exploring today. And we're going to be using SuperScore on the iPad as a facilitating vehicle that makes it very easy for us to show you musical examples and to bring them to life with the playback that SuperScore offers on the iPad. And all of Paul's compositions and arrangements these days are available in SuperScore on the iPad. You can look for them from CyberConservatory and Carl Fisher in the SuperScore store. So as we go along, I hope you'd tell us in the chat area who you are, who's attending live, and where you're from. We'll keep an eye on that. It really helps us to feel connected to the audience. And if you have specific questions, please, if you can remember, use the Q&A window. There should be a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. your screen for Zoom is small, it may be the dot button on the right side, where inside of which you'll find the Q&A. But it gives me a list of questions that might accumulate during the webinar, and it's one that I can curate and easily get back to and make sure that we address them. And I'm seeing a lot of Canadians as well as visitors from the United States and elsewhere in our list today, and so we're really excited. So to kick us off, let's just talk about a fundamental issue of tonality versus atonality. In much of the music that we play and enjoy in Western society, it's tonal music, and dissonance has a context that's a tonal context. The music centers around a tonal center, the key that we're in. And when music tends to drift away from a tonal center, or the tonal center becomes very vague, we head towards this realm of music known as atonal music. And just to illustrate a few simple examples, here is Bagatelle by Diabelli. It's Paul, this comes from one of your publications, which is?
This is in classics from
Outside, I
around,
think.
yeah, outside the box. I think it's level 2.
So let's just take a little listen to the beginning. And I'll skip ahead to the second section. So clearly it's a piece that has dissonances in it, but they're easy to be acclimated to. We've got dissonance as a result of pedal points. We have dissonance as a result of dominant seventh chords. But these are familiar sounds, and familiarity, of course, is a good bit of what goes into our reactions towards dissonance. But I'd like to play a little march here that takes us on a different sort of journey. I'm going to pause it right there, Paul. So students asked you, what key did you write this in? What would you have said?
I don't know.
You don't know. Well, it certainly is ambiguous. It does kind of lead us somewhere toward the end.
It's a little bit of a combination of major, minor, and Phrygian, with the flat F natural, the melody, and with an ostinato accompaniment that is pure dissonance.
Yes, and of course for the student, at the very end, you're hearing C, D, and E. But if we listen
Yeah,
very
so it,
carefully to your accompaniment, you've kind of made a statement about what key you're in.
I was telling
Well,
George,
we just missed it. It comes after the end of the music here.
oh, sorry. And there we are.
They have a little trumpet telling us, well, let's end on C.
Yeah, I was with George and I were talking about an Italian expression that they use to describe tonality that is sort of buried in dissonance, and they call it in Italian tonalità sporca, or dirty tonality. And I think this would sort of fit that category.
That it would, and we'll have more to say about that a little later on. So, in my discussions with students, I like to broaden their concept that not all music is tonal to begin with, and there is a concept known as a tonal center, and or the absence thereof. And we're going to approach the issues of dissonances in kind of one of those categories or another, typically. And so, if we just think about the fact that we're working in a tonal framework, um, and in that framework, there are going to be functions of dissonance that drive in a certain direction. We might examine some examples like this. A straightforward one, again, from, I think this is Classics Outside the Box. Paul, arrangement of,
Yeah.
with the backing tracks, that is. And at the very end, we have clearly dominant tonic kinds of functions there. The dominant seventh chords lead us to the tonic, which leads us to the sense of a tonal center. Here's a scherzo by Weber, also very tonal, but dissonance gets a good bit more strident. I'm sorry, I had set the tempo down. Let me put that back to 100%. And when it's played a tempo, of course, it sounds great. But a student learning very slowly here in measure 3 gets to that third, eighth note of the bar, and there's a lot of dissonance there. The bass is an A, the treble is a G sharp. We've got two different diminished fifths or augmented fourths embedded in that chord, highly dissonant, but in a fast context, we just feel that this dissonance leads us to a resolution, and we can be quite happy with that. So I think we probably all agree, as we're working with teaching pieces with students, that there are some dissonances that are easier to accept than others. And oftentimes in method books, we're going to hear a piece like The Bear. And let's just listen to a little bit of this, Paul, and give us your concept of why students tend to like this piece, even if they find it quite a bit different from their other pieces. And we all know what it sounds like. You're hearing it in this case with backing tracks that Paul has imaginatively added to the piece. It's from Classics Outside the Box. Paul, why do you think students tend to enjoy playing the bear? It's clearly not a tonal piece at all. It's atonal.
It's actually one of these pieces that both students and teachers enjoy because it's a marvelous example of Rebekoff's imaginative use of the whole tone scale. So a lot of food for thought. But it's also fun. When I did the accompaniment, I really was trying to sort of underline the dissonant quality because without the accompaniment, it's a bit milder sounding, I think.
Yes, that is true. But it's also a piece that does have no tonal center.
Yeah, great opportunity to introduce the whole tone scale and the implications of that scale where there's no tonal center. So it's mild dissonance, I think, describes it marvelously.
So pieces without a tonal center, by virtue of the fact they're composed from a whole tone scale, tend to be pieces that students rather readily accept. Here's a different one from the Music Pathways series. So this,
Yeah, this is a composition by Lynn Freeman Olson.
and I think what both of these pieces are illustrating is the fact that if we put our musical attention on other elements, such as overall mood, um, and the idea of using sound to paint a visual picture, in one case, the bear, in another case, the swans, that we end up perceiving dissonance or the lack of a tonal center in a way that we can find really quite enjoyable and expressive. Here's another one. Any number of methods, such as the music pathways here from Carl Fischer, have pieces that are essentially drifting in outer space. This one by Lynn Freeman Olson. And this one gives us chord clusters, which in another context, if you were just to say to a student, how do you like this sound? uh, might get a rather negative reaction, but again, in an expressive context, can be a very beautiful one. And this is a type of piece where I would ask a student to just simply take that chord there in, what does it measure, 5, put down the sustain pedal, play that chord, and just spend the next 10 seconds listening to the resonance, the vibrations of those strings, and really relish in the sound of those conflicting notes and enjoy them for what they are.
It's a wonderful scale, by the way, for improvising because you can't really go wrong.
That's right. And you can't stop. You have to just keep going because you'll be in search of a tonal center that you'll never find. Um, Now, here's one that's uh, it's not tonal in the typical sense, and it's got a lot more stridency to it. This is from an album from Carl Fischer by Lynn Freeman Olson called Piano Favorites. It's the Bumblebee Toccata. And you got a wonderful accompaniment going on with that, Paul. So we got a combination of chromaticism in measures 1 and 2, and whole tone scale in 3 and 4. Um, in a sense, there's a lot of tonal confusion going on there.
Yeah. I just would like to mention uh, I had the wonderful pleasure of counting Lynn Freeman Olson among my close friends. He was an incredible musician and marvelous educator and a wonderful friend. He in fact, he really brought me into Carl Fischer with interludes because he was the piano editor. And one day we had a meeting, and I showed him the manuscript, and he liked it and sought to publishing it. I am eternally grateful to him for his generosity, but I also was endlessly uh, impressed by his career. He died sadly, before I had gotten around to trying to create backing tracks. I like to think that he would have appreciated them.
Hopefully, he would have. I only got a chance to meet him once. I was very young in my career and did not have the pleasure of actually knowing him. So we've started off by kind of dividing music into two camps: music that's tonal, it gravitates towards a particular center, and that dissonance is a vehicle that moves us towards that center. Then we have music that has no defined tonal center, or the tonal center is vague, and chromatic scales, whole tone scales contribute to that. And those are types of pieces where we really appreciate the dissonance in a different way, pretty much for its own sake. Here's one more example. And of course, if we're multicultural in our approach to introducing literature to students, we'll often find music from other cultures that have a different sense about them. So, Paul, I know you had probably found this tune in a folk tune book and then made an arrangement. What inspired you to construct the types of harmonies that you used in this?
Well, I probably did this about maybe 60 years ago. So I'd have to take a trip down memory lane to answer that question, George. I think I was just struck by the sort of exotic sound of the melody, and
Well, it seems
and
to me
felt,
that in the lower staff of the primo part, we have almost a percussion kind of figure going on.
yeah, just that ostinato seemed to be an appropriate sound to accompany this exotic sounding scale,
And that
pentatonic scale.
and that's an important aspect of percussive instruments. They really are in two different categories. There are pitch percussion, then there's non-pitched percussion, which peculiarly we can often sense that it's got a high sound or a low sound, but we can't really identify the pitch per se. And little chord clusters like this, I think, imitate that very beautifully. Well, um, we've really introduced a bit the concept of scales and how they are going to impact our sense of dissonance in a piece, having talked about chromatic scales and whole tone scales a little bit. Let's look at the world of other kinds of tonal scales. So this is All the Pretty Horses. So if we were to illustrate that piece, we'd have to say, by virtue of where it ends up, it is definitely in the key of E, and it has a minor quality to it. And if we were just to play the scale tones that are used, there's just one sharp in the key signature. Whoops. We would say that that was the Aeolian scale, played with E as the tonal center. Now, at one point in the piece, there was a C sharp. I'd argue it's actually part of a secondary dominant, but if one were to think about that part melodically, one might argue that we had a little bit of an Adorian quality to that, which gave the piece a really interesting sound. Going on to our next one in our list, we have mirrors. Let's think about what scale is used here. And so forth. And if we get near the very end, we'd say, well, Up to that point, clearly D is the tonal center. There is a little bit of a surprise with the secondo part, though. That introduces some surprising ambiguity there. But if we think of the student part as the primary part here and examine the notes that are used in this particular piece, sorry, it was the white note D scale, which we all know is the Dorian scale.
When I introduce with my students the various forms of the minor scale, the harmonic and melodic, which are, curious because they're really inventions to try to justify practice, I go a step further and say, well, okay, we've introduced the raised seventh, we've introduced the raised sixth and seventh, but what about if we just introduce the raised sixth? It's a wonderful opportunity to add the Dorian to the mix, and then it's only a step from there to add the Phrygian by just lowering the second. So you cover the range of different minor sounding modes, including Dorian and Phrygian as part of that mix.
Oh, absolutely. And I think if we were to go back to Classroom Maestro here and illustrate that in E, if we were to think in terms of major scales, clearly that's an E major scale. However, if we took out that D sharp and, oops, I need to get over to here and create it as a D natural instead, we have the Mixolydian scale. If, as an alternative, we had done that, we have a raised fourth degree. Now we've got the Lydian scale. So there's two modal scales that are essentially variants on the major scale. And if we think about the natural minor scale, as Paul was saying, but just raise the sixth degree, we get the Dorian. If we were to lower the second degree, we get the Phrygian. So we've got three different minor scales that are three minor sounding scales that are very closely related.
It makes the study of the modes very easy if you just categorize them in basically excluding the Locrian, which is unto itself. But otherwise, there are three major sounding modes and three minor sounding modes. And so it's very easy to grasp, understand the modes in this context. So here, for example, we see an example of the Phrygian mode with the lowered second, E minor with lower second.
And of course,
This,
go ahead.
yeah, no, I was just going to say this from a collection called One Plus One. I had originally just started with the Primo. There was a collection of solo pieces, and then I decided it might be fun to turn them into a kind of duet, but it's a little unusual in that the Primo part is actually can be played as a solo, and you have to kind of the secondo part player has to be on rather uh, intimate terms with the solo player because you really have to kind of wrap your arms around one another. So it's a great opportunity for the teacher to give the student a little hug.
Uh, so here is one that I believe we have a Mixolydian piece. Debka Hora?
So that was a case where the melody is simply E minor pentascale, but I introduced these the dissonant ostinato to give it the kind of color that I thought was appropriate to an Israeli folk song.
Yes, and somehow the word Mixolydian came out of my mouth when it should have been Dorian. So I apologize for that. Spirals. Let's take a little listen to this one. So here we've got notes of what you might think are, well, it looks kind of like the C major scale. Our bass notes at the end is an F. Um, we've got an F pedal point going on. I would say we've got the piece that's in a Lydian F scale. Wouldn't you say, Paul?
Yeah, it's a Lydian the melody in the left-hand part of the primo is definitely in the Lydian mode, and it is kind of it has a kind of a canonic feeling, not really a canon, but it has that sort of contrapuntal feeling, and definitely to my ear, that is a wonderful example of Lydian, and all of these examples are sort of easy dissonance. They're not uh, major minor uh, oriented, but and they definitely have a tonal center, but it's easy to, and you can see that ostinato in the left hand, that those repeating chords, not really an ostinato, just repeated chords, uh, give it that kind of exotic feeling.
Yes, so it's that raised fourth, the B natural.
Yeah.
Okay, now with Fair Maidens, we've got something else going on here. So I think we've got a situation where our right and left hands don't agree on which scale is being used. It looks to me like we got an F major in the right hand.
It's a,
We've got a Lydian F in the left hand. Would you agree?
yeah, it's a cross relationship. I try always to introduce two elements in my compositions. One is the joy of beautiful sounds, and the other is something for the teacher to be engaged in. And here you can see there's a wonderful opportunity to do that interesting progression of the F major, G major relationship in the different inversions. And so the student thinks he or she is playing a nice sounding piece, and the teacher is delighted to have an opportunity to talk about inversions.
Clever you are.
Thank you.
And we'll just hear a little bit about this one. This was the opening tune that you may have heard when you were coming in. So we've got an F major scale, except, well, there's an E flat in it. Which gives us some nice Mixolydian dissonance in the harmonization. And we've got more Mixolydian here. Piece in the key of C with very obvious B flats.
I think that what was on my mind very much when I was doing this, this is from a collection which originally existed. Uh, it was called Sounds and Shapes, and I was trying very hard to get away from conventional harmonizations and try to introduce uh, accompaniments that brought in something of an unusual flavor. Uh,
And I think you do that really very beautifully in this series known as Folk Songs from Planet Earth. It's 9 levels of folk material that progressively gets more difficult. And
Not more difficult, more complex perhaps, but as we progress, they become less difficult, George.
well, I stand corrected on that one, Paul. And this is one of my favorite ones. It does a wonderful job of just taking what would be a very easy to digest folk tune and suddenly chromaticism in a very imaginative way that I think nicely depicts the eensy weensy spider get thrown in. And if we think of our young students as being kind of a blank canvas, really willing to accept what's around them in the world, we got a wonderful opportunity with pieces like this to open up their ears. Let's listen to this one. Then we get into something a little more heavy duty that's of a chromatic nature. Um, so, Paul, you must have had some pedagogical ideas in mind when you wrote this one.
Well, this is from a collection with the rather, uh, how can I describe, etudes Brutus. Uh, just sometimes I come up with these ideas, and I decided what a good idea to write some little etudes that focus on specifics. So each one of my etudes Brutus focuses on a specific issue. And here, as you can see, it's the chromatic scale. And these are a little bit on the challenging side, where you have to kind of crisscross your hands ascending with these chromatic scales. But again, as you can see, this is lots of food for thought for the teacher to think of creative ways of introducing the how to learn this piece. I would start by just doing the nothing more than the first measure of the left hand, and then the first measure of the right hand, then combining and then just adding uh, until you build it up that way. I think it's kind of an interesting way of introducing the chromatic scale.
So, Paul, I'm going to rush through our next examples because we have so many more topics to get into, but just a little taste of some other pieces that use.
Yeah, well, this is sort of the companion to the other one with a holy feeling. I hope you all noticed a whole tone scale.
And so forth.
I think we're now getting into dissonance that's uh, a little less comfortable. Like here are whole tone clusters.
Yes, so it's not melodic so much as, well, let's listen to it. And of course, to play the piece facilely, or to learn what those clusters involve in terms of which pitches are being played, understanding that you're dealing with a whole tone scale will help immensely with the reading of the music. Rubber bands.
Yeah, this is based on, maybe you could show how this looks on Classroom Maestro. It really is a keyboard geography issue.
Okay, let me switch over there.
See, you're hovering first around, except there's no G sharp.
That's right. So that's where the 5 fingers would be sitting, the notes that are actually used.
That's right. And then we cluster around the twos. See,
Around.
that's the basis of, and I based the composition on that keyboard geography issue. And this one is from a collection called No Part Inventions. If you don't like them, you need to have no part of them. Bach wrote 2 and 3 part inventions, but he never thought of writing a no part invention. So it's kind of an interesting sound when you mirror those two positions.
A lot of fun going on in there, especially with.
Yeah, and by the way, there is a PDF in that collection which outlines these positions so that they're clear. And here is another kind of exotic
Non-wet
sounding.
scale. We have a flatted second degree. We've got a flatted sixth degree in that
Yeah, well,
scale.
it's kind of a harmonic minor sound.
And then bizarre. A C major pentascale with a flatted second degree, interestingly.
Yeah. By the way, this is from a collection called um, um, Duet Yourself. It's available in hard copy, and in the hard copy, the ostinato is printed out, and the idea is that you record the ostinato and then play the solo to your own recording, hence the name Duet Yourself, one of my little puns. But in the SuperScore version, not only do you have the ostinato, but you have an additional backing track. So because here's another one from the same. Uh, this is from No Part Inventions. Yes.
Yes, it's kind of a variant on the blues scale. And to be playing a D natural in the left hand against the D flat on the right hand, it it's not a sound that I think anybody would react to and say, I don't like that. That's really cool.
I hope you all notice that hot dogs is to be played with relish.
Absolutely. So let's go on to this concept of tonalita sporca. I was unfamiliar with that term, Paul, until you introduced it to me. You are much more a man of the world, a person who's performed across Europe. You were in residence in Italy for the longest time. I could just imagine you out there having your wine and cheese and talking about tonalita sporca with your musical colleagues.
You got the image exactly right, George.
So let's hear a little bit of dirty harmony. Starts off simply enough. here it comes. Where did that chord come from in measure 13, Paul?
That was from a particularly uh, strong cheese, a gorgonzola.
I see. Okay. So that's that. I think of these as crunchy type chords. Now, this has got a lot of crunch in it, more melodic crunch. And, how you play it is going to make a big difference in terms of your perception and your audience's perception of the dissonance. I think this one is a lot of fun to play, even if it's totally unpronounceable. I'll go on. And so forth. Paul?
So this is wacky dissonance, right?
Well, we're in the Sporka category.
Okay.
Um, and the big question in my mind is that title pronounceable?
Well, what else are you going to call this?
Okay, that said, calls and echoes. What do we have going on here? So we've got a melodic figure going on at the interval of a major ninth. Again, a very dissonant texture and a very interesting one. Let's take a listen to this dance from the folk song series. Starts off simply enough. So we get two of these Tonalita Sporka chords. You did a wonderful job of just sneaking in those interesting dissonances. Well, another kind of dissonance is one that actually has a way of grounding us, often with a low note on a tonic or the dominant that holds things together, the Orgelpunkt. Let's take a look at some examples of pedal point. And in this case, we've got some essentially pedal point happening not in the pedal range, but in the top voice. Which makes it quite acceptable to have that D natural going against the D sharp in several different places, because we've got accustomed to hearing this repeated D in the top. And that's really the nature of the pedal point type effect. And here we do have the pedal point in the lower range, even if the lower range isn't all that low. So if you were to take this apart and slowly play many of these different chords, you'd find, wow, that's really very dissonant, and then all of a sudden it's consonant. Put it all together, and it works very nicely because things are grounded by that reiterated low note.
By the way, George, I just want to compliment you on your fantastic choice of the visual comparisons. They're so beautiful and so well chosen.
Well, I did get some help from ChatGPT, who replicated imagery inspired by early 20th century painters, Paul Klee, Vasily Kandinsky, Joan Moreau, and so forth. And if anybody is interested in actually getting a list of the, or a PDF of the images and a little commentary about each one, I would be quite happy to provide that. Just as all of us might listen to any one particular piece of music with different ears and listening for different things. Uh, Likewise, we probably all see different things in these images as well. And whether this particular one we're looking at right now really captures the idea of dissonant intervals or not is maybe a concept that's in the eye of the beholder. But let's go ahead and listen to some music with some dissonant intervals. And in this case, we're basically just taking the perfect fourth and considering that perfect fourth to be a somewhat dissonant interval. Historically, people have had different concepts about how dissonant or consonant a perfect fourth might be, but that's how it's.
By the way, I hope you all noticed the use of the tuba. Uh, George and I are both infatuated with the sound of the tuba, and I've noticed occasionally George has managed to sneak in an extra tuba line.
Which it's hard to sneak in a tuba, but nonetheless, I did my best. So here is a piece that, well, you tell us about this, Paul. You wrote it to train a student in recognizing which combinations of black and white keys are used for perfect fourths.
Yeah, if you notice it, it's very easy to find a perfect fourth on the keyboard because it's always either white to white or black to black, except for the combination of F and B, or F sharp and B natural, F and B flat. So in the first measure, you can see the left hand starts with just the F and B flat, which is really, and then in the second measure, it just goes up the white keys, while the right hand starts with the F sharp and B, and then it goes up the black to black. So it's really, again, I'm using keyboard geography as a way of creating a study, and it happens to be a very nice study in chordal harmony and dissonance, but it's also illustrating how easy it is to find perfect fourths when you understand, and this is all outlined in our textbook called Foundations. In fact, I'm engaged now in doing a video to illustrate these points. But it's, again, a lot of food for thought. And when you understand the rationale behind the composition, it becomes very easy for the student to learn. In fact, I try to insist that they try to memorize it right away so that they understand the patterns. You want to just play a little bit, George?
Okay. And I'm going to have to quickly start to move through the rest of our example,
Yeah,
Paul, so we're getting close to the
yeah,
end of our hour. So we're
right.
looking at different types of dissonant intervals as being foundational elements in a composition. This is another one from the same series by Paul, and these are tritones.
This is actually from
I'm
modules
sorry.
where there's a piece for every interval. Yeah, my correction, actually, both those pieces were from modules.
Now, this is a very nice one. The accompaniment emphasizes on the second beats the major seventh. Which is another interesting effect and works very conveniently in this piece. So, Paul, you sometimes do things over and over again, kind of ostentatiously. Let's talk about
Very funny.
ostinatos in music,
Yeah,
repeated patterns.
yeah, I do love the ostinato.
So we get used to this accompaniment dissonance by virtue of the fact that we're just hearing it over and over again, regardless of what may be happening in the upper area.
Yeah, that sort of felt quite French to me, to sort of have a kind of Poulenc quality.
So bitonality, two different keys going on at the same time. What are some examples here? Well, whack. How about this one? And if you were to trace things out, you'd find that, well, at least up to that point in the piece, the right hand is focused on white keys, the left hand on black keys, and neither one is agreeing on a central gravitational point.
Again, it's a kind of a keyboard issue. I decided to call it whack for white and black because I could have called it black and white, but that would have been blight. So I thought whack was a better choice. And here we have another example of similar idea.
Yeah, and in fact, we have two different key signatures to represent what's going on. And I'm going to play this just a little bit to a certain point to point out an interesting feature. Which is we've got a right hand that's fighting for G flat as the tonal center, the left hand fighting for G natural as the tonal center. And then we hear that trumpet, and the trumpet is going to decide for itself which one it thinks is the tonal center. Well, let's talk about unrelated chords. We've looked at so many examples where harmony in the very traditional pieces like Diabelli, for example, we've got dominant tonic effects that the dissonance is intended to drive us towards our landing spot. But chords can also just kind of float out there in different ways. Let's listen to a piece here by Lynn Freeman Olson from Piano Favorites. It's Toboggan Ride. And if we listen for harmonies like that, it's not functional harmonies in the normal sense. And I find that part very interesting. The relationship between those two open fifth chords, if we put those notes all together, we end up as with F minor seventh chord, and where our tonal center is in fact F, which is interesting the way he can weave back and forth between some rather contemporary sounds and rather traditional harmony. Paul, here's one of yours, Teardrops. So we have chords that are not related in the normal Western tonic, subdominant, dominant kind of context.
Yeah, very briefly. This is from a collection called In Perfect Accord. I was teaching a class at Hunter College in New York City, and a student at one point said, "What's the difference between a progression and an inversion?" I thought, "Oh my God, who's teaching this class?" That has not been clarified, but each piece focuses on a different configuration of chords, either moving by inversion, by pivoting, by progression, or simply by being close together, as in this case, but having no relationship whatsoever.
So we have 6 additional examples we'd like to cover, and we'll go through them fairly quickly, starting with a couple examples of chords that never seem to resolve. So they're chords that have um, a beauty all into themselves, and their importance, I think, is more in what they individually stand for than they are in terms of I need to give way to the next chord and lead to that next chord. No, um, I stand alone as a chord of independent value. At least that's my way of listening to them. Again, more unrelated chords, but chords that are, um, part of our sense of tertian harmony, and we can.
These pieces are from a collection called Paul's Perplexing Piano Pieces.
And then, as we all know, in the area of jazz, harmonies get extended, and other approaches to harmonies, such as chords built on fourths, may emerge as part of the fabric of the music. Want to tell us about that collection, Paul?
Oh, that's called Blues and All That Jazz. I had a student who came to me. He wanted to learn to play blues piano. That's really not my strength. And I told him that he was barking up the wrong tree. But he insisted, he said, "No, I hear you. You're a very nice teacher. I'll bring you some examples." And I started composing these pieces inspired by this student. And there were two collections. One's called Blues for Fun, and the other was called Blues and All That Jazz. And they got pretty, he was quite advanced, so I could write pieces for him that uh, challenged him. And you can see, yeah, this is,
From Imperfect.
I think this is from Perfect Accord. This is using chords, using chordal harmony, chords based on fourths rather than thirds.
A lot of fun.
I love that kind.
Well, Paul, we've covered a whole bunch of topics having to do with dissonances. Um, but sometimes composers, maybe even you, have just gone a little bit wacky, shall we say? Would you confess to
Not me.
not you? Well, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, may I present Crazy Machine from Marion Mello by Paul Sheftel. So, Paul, what inspired that one?
Uh, I
Had you spent time working in a factory?
I probably had a little disagreement with my wife that day.
Understood. Well, I hope everybody has had an enjoyable experience taking a look at a whole variety of wonderful teaching pieces from beginning to late intermediate level that approach issues of dissonances from a whole variety of different perspectives. If anybody would like to make comments about what we've talked about today or offer your own insights into how you cover these topics in your own teaching, of course, we'd be delighted to hear about that. But we've come to the end of our examples. Other than that, thank you, Andrew, much
But
for your comment.
I want to do a shout out to George, who had the idea, this idea of the dissonance. And when he first proposed it, I had a kind of a dissonant reaction. Well, I don't know what you mean by that. And George, I want to compliment you on how masterfully you uh, created this lovely webinar with the marvelous visuals and the very thoughtful approach. And thank you for putting the spotlight on. So I didn't realize I used dissonance to that extent. Uh, so I thank you for highlighting that.
Well, it's true that we any one of us can look at or experience an object, whether that object is music or it's art or something else, and see and hear and experience different things in it. And one of the things that I've always enjoyed in your pieces are these varied treatments of the music that bring in different types of scales and the resulting dissonances. Um, and they become fun topics for me with my students. It feels like we can really cover several centuries of music history stylistically, working with pieces of these natures.
We've gotten some very generous thank yous. Thank you all for being with us, and thank you for the lovely thank yous. That means a great deal. It really does.
And if you would like to contact either one of us subsequently, and you're interested in the imagery, I'd be happy to send you a PDF of the images and commentary.
Always very happy to hear from you.
Absolutely. So I think, Paul, we'll call it a day at this point. I'd like to wish everybody a happy and delightful holiday season. Um, TimeWarp will be back in the new year with a whole regular series of webinars. And of course, we're going to be continuing to cover music from um, not only a wide variety of publishers, but we'll continue to highlight musical projects from CyberConservatory, which is a joint venture I have with Paul Sheftel. And we'll be also announcing and demonstrating an emerging series of something you may have heard of, the Well-Tempered Clavier. There's even 2 books of them. And we have prepared the scores, and Paul has recorded all of the pieces, and they're going to be released one at a time with video commentary attached to the pieces. So there's going to be lots and lots for us to talk about with you in the new year, and I hope you'll stay in touch with us.
George, several people have wanted to know how they can see the chat.
Um, well, there is a chat button at the bottom of the Zoom window where you should be able to click and bring up the chat area.
Thank you all for being with us. It's been a real joy.
That it has been. And so, best wishes for the holiday season, and a happy new year to you all.
Bye.